Every AI vendor will tell you the same thing. Don't worry, there's a human in the loop. It sounds reassuring, and a clinician reviews every recommendation, and we assume that a person approves every decision, that safety is built in. But here's what I've seen during implementations: having a human in the loop and having meaningful oversight, they're not the same thing. And the data backs it up. A recent survey found that 2 out of 3 healthcare professionals don't feel very confident using or evaluating AI tools in their workflows. Think about what that means. The person that you're counting on to catch errors, to identify bias, or to flag the drift doesn't feel equipped to do it. Here's what makes it even a little bit worse: most of those same professionals expect that they're going to be held accountable, even if something goes wrong, and even if they had no role in selecting or configuring the system. That is a breakdown of trust. It's exposure, not oversight. Here's the problem with human in the loop governance as a governance concept. Here's the problem with human in the loop as a governance concept. It assumes that the human has the context to evaluate the AI's recommendation. It also assumes that they have time to do it properly. And it assumes that they have the authority to override or to even escalate something when it seems wrong. And it assumes that there is a system for them to go and report to if it does happen. And most It assumes the human has the context to evaluate AI's recommendations. It also assumes that they have the time to do it properly. And the third assumption is that they have the authority to override or to escalate when something seems wrong. And it assumes that there's always a system that learns when they do. Well, in practice, when most implementations fail, in, in practice, most implementations fail on more than one of those counts. In practice, most in practice, most implementations fail on one of 4 counts, right? The clinician sees a recommendation, but they're busy. The workflow is designed to make that acceptance easy and to make rejection hard. Now, they may not know how the algorithm was trained or what data it used or how its performance has changed since it was deployed. And if they override it, that feedback often goes nowhere. So researchers have a phrase for this. It's called symbolic oversight. That means that the human is present, but the loop isn't actually functioning as a governance mechanism. It's functioning as transferring liability from one person to another. So one legal scholar put it this way: the learned intermediary idea assumes that human intermediary. So one legal scholar put it this way: the learned intermediary, that idea assumes that a human intermediary can absorb responsibility by applying professional judgment. Well, that only works in real life if the workflow supports that judgment with time, evidence, and clear decision rights. Now, if those conditions aren't present, oversight becomes a screen level action rather than making an informed decision. That's the gap that we see, right? Organizations say human in the loop because it sounds safe, but they really haven't built that infrastructure that makes it true. So, what would real oversight look like? Well, it would mean that the person reviewing the AI recommendation understands the algorithm's intended use and known limitations. It would also mean that they can see how confident the system is in its recommendations. It would mean that they can see how confident the system is in its own recommendations. It would mean that there's a clear path to escalate concerns, and that when you do escalate, these concerns get tracked and addressed. And it would mean that the overrides would actually inform how the system performs going forward. That's not just having a human present, that's having humans in control. And so consider what happens when model drift occurs, right? So your algorithm will start performing differently. Maybe it's flagging more patients as high risk. Maybe it's fewer. And the clinician notices something feels off, but there's not like a baseline to compare it against. So no dashboard is showing them the historical performance, and there's no clear way for them to report it except they're sending an email that may or may not get acted on, or maybe they're putting in a JIRA ticket that gets lost in IT land. Meanwhile, they're still expected to sign off on every decision. Meanwhile, they're still expected to sign off on every recommendation because there's a human in the loop. Now, this is where the governance model starts to break. The human is there, but the loop isn't giving them what they need to actually oversee anything. So here's my question for you. Look at your current AI implementations. For each one, I want you to ask, does the person in the loop have the context to evaluate the recommendation? Do they have the time? Do they have the authority to override? And does the system learn when they do? If the answer to any of those is no, then it means that you don't have oversight, that you just have a checkbox. And checkboxes don't protect patients or organizations. Governance does. Real oversight, that requires knowing what to actually walk. Real oversight requires knowing what to actually watch for as your AI scales across the organization. And that's what we need to talk about next. What to monitor, just as importantly as what not to do. Real oversight reco Real oversight requires knowing what to actually watch for as your AI scales across the organization. And that's what we need to talk about next. What to monitor, but just as importantly, what not to.